On Wednesday, the 16th of July, 1986, at approximately 11 a.m, a fatal explosion occurred at the Moura No. 4 mine in Central Queensland. As a consequence, 12 miners working in the main dip section of the mine were tragically killed. The bodies of the miners were recovered a week later, on the 23rd of July, after an extensive recovery operation. An inquiry was held at Rockhampton, conducted by the mining warden with the assistance from 4 persons having practical mining knowledge. The inquiry commenced on the 9th of February 1987 and closed almost 3 weeks later on the 27th of February. The purpose of the investigation and subsequent evidence given to the inquiry was to provide answers to the following questions. What were the events which took place in the panel between the time the undermanager left to travel to the surface and the time at which the explosion occurred? What was the source of the fuel which ignited to cause the explosion? What was the source of the ignition of the explosion? 8 possible sources of ignition were considered. The inquiry concluded that the flame safety lamp, although properly assembled, was the most likely source of ignition, but that other sources could not be completely ruled out. 12 recommendations were made by the members of the inquiry, the most important of these being that the flame safety lamps be prohibited from use in underground coal mines in Queensland, subject to limited exceptions. Moura 4 was worked by a board and pillar mining system, having 3 main surface portals to enter the mine. The main headings were extended along the seam dip at approximately 1 in 7. The travel distance from the surface to the main dip section was approximately 1,500 metres. The dip of the coal seam would have made the vertical depth of the dip section approximately 170 metres below the surface. Mining of the 7-metre coal seam was carried out by way of continuous miners and shuttle cars with conveyor belts to transport the coal to the surface. Strata support consisted of roof bolting, and breaker props were installed during extraction operations. Only the top 3 metres of the upper part of the seam was extracted. The 60-metre layer of strata above the seam consisted mainly of massive bands of sandstone. The coal seam was described by witnesses as being fairly gassy. The inquiry heard that a large roof fall was expected and had most likely occurred in the Gove area, generating a wind blast that created a mixture of methane, air and coal dust in the working area of the section. An explosive atmosphere developed and was most likely ignited by the deputy's flame safety lamp. The ignition occurred at approximately 11 a.m, in turn triggering a more violent coal dust explosion throughout the main dip section. The explosion was eventually quenched by the presence of a water barrier in the belt road and substantial quantities of water which had gathered in swillies near the fault further out by in the panel. Observers on the surface witnessed a large dust cloud emerge from the mine portals. There was an interruption to power underground, and almost immediately damage was reported at the main ventilation fan. Having expected a major roof fall, it took some time for persons on the surface to recognise that an explosion had actually occurred. "20 men had been working underground at the time of the explosion. 8 of the 20 miners working in other districts managed to escape to the surface, uncertain about what had just happened in the mine. The fate of the 12 miners working in the main dip section was unknown at that time. By 1:30 p.m, several rescue teams had made attempts to inspect the mine, but had been hampered by poor visibility and the presence of high concentrations of carbon monoxide in the mine. Rescuers managed to reach the Taj Mahal, the location of the fault on the travel road, despite visibility being reported as nil. The metal support structures had been completely destroyed. The possibility of a secondary explosion caused the suspension of further rescue attempts until an accurate assessment of the mine atmosphere could be completed. The following day, on Thursday the 17th of July, at approximately 9:30 am, once the emergency services were satisfied with the trend of the gas readings, rescue teams were permitted to re-enter the mine. Many difficulties were experienced during this period, with poor visibility and blast debris. 10 of the 12 miners were located near or around the shuttle cars, however they were not recovered at this time. Further recovery operations were halted due to the presence of mine fires and other explosion risk factors. A decision was made to bring the New South Wales Mines Rescue Service Mine Shield inertisation equipment, but logistical challenges delayed its progress. A week later, on Wednesday the 23rd of July, at approximately 8:20 am. For the past 6 days, having finally pumped tons of nitrogen into the mine via boreholes to suppress any fires, it was decided to attempt to recover the miners from the mine. Physical conditions were extremely arduous, with high temperature and humidity, very poor visibility, and extensive blast debris. However, in spite of these terrible conditions, all of the miners which had been previously located were recovered, together with the 2 miners which had not previously been located. One of these being that of a young cadet miner who was located beneath the out bisection of shuttle car number 31. The inquiry found that an accident had most likely occurred at some point immediately prior to the explosion, during the retreating of machinery. A young miner had become trapped by a shuttle car, and other workers were tending to his aid at the time of the explosion. Once the recovery of the miners had been completed, 23 mines rescue teams continued to work for the next several days to secure the recovery of the mine. The inquiry into the disaster commenced on the 9th of February 1987 and concluded with its 12 recommendations. The Moura No mine disaster is critical in understanding the potential consequences of a coal mine explosion. It is the only major mine explosion which was re-entered in Queensland in the past 100 years. The mine plan and photos from Moura No are the only detailed account that we have of a major mine explosion in a Queensland underground coal mine. The real monument to the men killed at Moura No are the lessons that we have learned to protect the coal miners of yesterday, today, and the future.